Have you ever had the feeling that your life looks fine on paper, but somehow it doesn't feel right to you inside anymore? Maybe you've built a successful career, raised a family, become someone other people depend on. You've spent years being responsible, doing what needed to be done, meeting expectations, keeping your commitments. And yet, lately you find yourself wondering, why doesn't this life fit me anymore? Maybe the question sounds more like, I don't feel like myself anymore. Maybe you feel a little lost. You can't necessarily point to one dramatic problem. Nothing has completely fallen apart, but something feels off, disconnected, or like I say, maybe it feels a little lost. So today, I want to talk about that feeling because I think far more people experience it than we realize. Before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to say hello and welcome. I'm Janet, architect, mentor, watercolor artist, and a creative renewal coach. I founded Blueprint to Brushstrokes to help thoughtful mid-career professionals reconnect with their authentic voice, meaningful purpose, and creative potential so they can intentionally design a meaningful next chapter of their lives. Through these videos, coaching conversations, creative practice, and my reflections, my hope is to create a space where people feel safe enough to ask deeper questions. Questions about identity, purpose, creativity, meaning, and what happens when the life we've built no longer feels fully aligned with who we're becoming. If that's where you find yourself right now, please know you're not alone. One of the challenges with this experience is that it's easy to dismiss. We tell ourselves we're fortunate. We remind ourselves of everything that's going well. We convince ourselves that we should simply just be grateful. And gratitude matters. But gratitude doesn't eliminate truth. When we ignore that quiet feeling for far too long, something begins to happen. We become disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from our creativity, disconnected from our curiosity, disconnected from our joy. Life starts to feel more like obligation and duty than participation. Days become something we manage rather than something we inhabit. We continue functioning, we continue producing, we continue meeting expectations. But somewhere deep down, something begins to feel numb. And over time, that disconnection quietly grows. Not because we're broken, but because an important part of ourselves is waiting for us to hear it. Over the years, I've noticed this pattern again and again. In architecture, in leadership, in mentoring, in coaching conversations, and certainly in my own life. The people experiencing this aren't typically failing. In fact, they're often highly capable and on the surface, highly successful people. Responsible people, thoughtful people, people who've spent years showing up for others, people who have built meaningful careers and contributed in important ways. From the outside, their lives look incredibly successful. But beneath that success is a growing awareness that the version of life they've been living no longer fits as comfortably as it once did. I've experienced that myself. Not because architecture was wrong, not because the choices I made were wrong, but because over time I began to realize that there were parts of me asking for more space, more attention, more creativity, more meaning, more alignment, a deeper sense of purpose. When people start feeling this way, the advice they often receive sounds something like this. Take a vacation or a little break. Be more productive. Set new goals. Create a better plan. Just push through it. Work harder. Stay positive. And while those things can have value, they often miss the deeper issue because this isn't usually a motivation problem. It's not a discipline problem. It's not even necessarily a productivity problem. It's often a disconnection problem. You can be incredibly productive and still feel completely disconnected from your work. You can be highly successful and still feel completely lost. You can achieve every goal on your list, and still feel like something important is missing. Trying to solve disconnection with more achievement often creates more of the very thing that's hurting us. Sometimes the life we've built was designed for an earlier version of ourselves. And that isn't failure, it's growth. The person who made those decisions 20 years ago may have been making the very best of choices that were available at the time. Those choices may have served you well. They may have helped you build a meaningful career, support a family, create stability, contribute to the world. But people evolve. And sometimes we arrive at a season where we begin asking new questions. Questions we didn't have the capacity, experience, or wisdom to ask earlier in life. I don't think the discomfort many people feel in midlife is evidence that something has really gone wrong. I think it's often evidence that something important is trying to emerge, not a crisis, but instead an invitation to reconnect, to reassess, to listen, to become more intentional about what's coming next in your life. Because this isn't about throwing your life away and starting over. It's about creating a closer alignment between the life you're living and the person you're becoming. But let's be honest about something here. That process can feel incredibly uncomfortable, especially for responsible people, especially for people who spent decades meeting expectations, especially for highly sensitive people. You might feel guilty for wanting something different. You might feel guilty for letting other people down. You might question yourself. You might wonder whether you're being selfish. You might even try to talk yourself out of what you're feeling. But wanting greater authenticity isn't selfish. Wanting greater meaning isn't selfish. Wanting more alignment isn't selfish. They're deeply human desires. The question isn't whether those feelings exist. The question is whether we're willing to listen to them with curiosity instead of judgment. I know how difficult that can be because I've faced that tension myself. There came a point when I realized I was neglecting parts of myself that felt deeply important. Not because I didn't care about them, not because they lacked value, but because I was afraid. Afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being judged, afraid of stepping away from expectations that had shaped much of my life. What ultimately surprised me was that many of the people I feared disappointing were actually the people most willing to support me. That's not to say that everybody was. I don't want to be naive. Some people, through perhaps their own challenges, framed my needs as challenging their own. And those did create tensions. But the people who truly cared about me and truly wanted the best for me, my strong and healthy tribe, they truly supported and loved me and encouraged me to make these changes. So oftentimes, the expectations I was struggling against most often turned out to be my own. And perhaps that's why Wayne Dyer's words have stayed with me. Don't die with your music still in you. I don't think he was only talking about creativity. I think he was talking about all the gifts, dreams, callings, and possibilities that remain unrealized when we ignore what our hearts keep trying to tell us. Sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is listen. If this conversation resonates with you, I'd like to invite you to try something simple this week. Set aside 10 quiet minutes. Take a journal, a notebook, or even a scrap piece of paper and answer one question. What feels like it no longer fits? Don't rush to solve it. You don't have to create a 5-year plan. And don't judge your answer. Simply observe and honor it. Notice what feels heavy, what feels alive, what feels complete, what feels unfinished. What part of you has been asking for attention? That's enough. Awareness is often the very first brushstroke, the first step towards meaningful change. Imagine what might change if you stopped treating this feeling as a problem to eliminate. Imagine if it were just information instead, a signal, a message, an invitation. Imagine reconnecting with parts of yourself that have been patiently waiting beneath all of the responsibilities. Your creativity, your curiosity, your voice, your sense of possibility. Imagine approaching this season not as the beginning of decline, but as the beginning of design, not the end of your story, the start of the next chapter, one that will be shaped more consciously, more intentionally, and more authentically. I don't think the most important midlife question is, what should I do next? I think the deeper question is, who am I becoming? Because when we understand who we're becoming, many other decisions start to make more sense. The life we built may not fit in exactly the same way it once did, and that's okay. Lives evolve. People evolve. What matters is we allow ourselves to evolve with them. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had the feeling that the life you've built no longer fits? What did that feel like for you? And if you're looking for support as you navigate your own next chapter, you'll find links below to my newsletter, companion reflections, and the one-on-one creative reset conversations. They're designed to help thoughtful adults reconnect with creativity, clarity, purpose, and possibility through honest reflection and meaningful conversation. And if that feels like the right next step for you, I'd be honored to support you. If you've been feeling like something no longer fits, I want you to know that you're not alone. And I don't believe that feeling necessarily means something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply a signal that you've reached a threshold, a moment when the next chapter is quietly asking for your attention. You don't need to have all the answers today. You don't need to abandon or reinvent your entire life. You don't need to force clarity. You only need enough courage to listen, because the life you built brought you here. And now you have an opportunity to decide what comes next. After all, a meaningful next chapter isn't something you just find. It's something you design. One thoughtful blueprint, one courageous brushstroke, and one grace-filled day at a time. Until next time, wishing you a gentle, creative, grace-filled day. And I'll see you in the next video.